Posting a video that gets 7 views sucks. And if you're over 40, maybe that hurts a little extra. But starting a YouTube channel over 40, it's still worth it, even if no one watches at all. And I'm literally living this right now on this channel. I have 6 videos and 2 videos have hit double digits. But I'm starting to see these failed videos a little bit differently, and I want to share with you what these videos are actually teaching me, because I think we've all totally been measuring the wrong thing. I mean, I get it. You know, at our age, starting anything new feels pretty heavy. And you're not just trying something, you're risking looking like an idiot in front of people who knew you before you started with this YouTube thing, as they're gonna call it, right? Are you still doing that YouTube thing? But those fears that are like super specific to us being over 40, what if they're actually pointing us towards exactly the kind of stuff that we should be doing, we ought to be doing? So let me just put the finger on what's actually going on here, because if you're over 40 and thinking about starting a YouTube channel, you're dealing with fears that younger YouTubers probably don't have. For instance, like fear of irrelevance. YouTube feels kind of like it's designed for, 25-year-olds with perfect skin and amazing boundless energy, right? And you watch these guys and you think, I'm not like those guys at all, right? Then there's things like fear of exposure, especially if you're an introvert like me. At 20, putting yourself out there, that feels pretty brave and cool. But at 45, it can feel a little bit desperate. Then there's the whole fear of judgment thing, not just from strangers, but from co-workers, friends, family, people that you go and hang out with at the gym. And of course, people that you worked with, in the that only know you from like the professional phase of your life, wondering why you're actually making videos in your spare bedroom or spare dining room in my case. And then there's the big one, the fear of wasting time, because time is just different when we're over 40. Every single hour that you spend editing a video, recording a video that gets like 3 views, feels like an hour you could have spent on something else, something more practical or more productive or more fun. I felt all of those. And that exact moment when I posted my second video and then I watched the view count just stay frozen for like 3 days with like a couple of views. I mean, I actually started wondering if there was like a glitch in YouTube. But there wasn't. It was just the reality of YouTube. And that reality can feel pretty brutal when you're used to being at least somewhat competent at doing stuff, But here's what I'm starting to learn about these single-digit views. They're not measuring what I thought they were measuring at all. I was measuring, success, obviously. Views, because that's like the validation that I did something right with a video. But obviously I'm not getting many views. But what these early videos right now are actually doing is they're giving me reps. So I think about this like this now. Don't measure success by views, measure it by reps. And that reframe really helps, right? So I'm giving myself a goal right now, which is just to post 10 videos before I start, checking analytics on my phone like some crack addict, Because those 10 aren't for YouTube or the algorithm. They're for me. And that's for me to get comfortable on camera, to practice, get comfortable actually, reading my bullet points right here so I don't start rambling. and to find some kind of rhythm in creating and publishing videos. Every awkward transition, every time I stumble over my words, which I happen to do a lot, every video where my lighting's off or the color looked weird, those aren't actually failures, right? They're data, like what you ought to do and maybe you should correct. So that's just for me to learn what works and doesn't work, and then figure out how I can correct it. And from YouTube's perspective, these regular uploads are teaching them who I am and who my audience might be. So, and that's obviously even, right now I don't really have an audience, but YouTube's trying to figure that out, right? They're going to start sending impressions, even though the impressions also are low right now, but I know that that's kind of how it works. It kind of takes a minute to train YouTube to know who to send the videos out to. And the thing is, I just had this conversation with a friend of mine, and he was talking about how he doesn't really get any views on Instagram, like Reels and TikTok and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, I only get like 8, 10, 15 views. And I'm like, oh, but that's amazing. Just imagine those guys being in this room. That's 8 people that are paying attention to you for those few minutes, That's a small audience. And those are 8 people that chose to spend their time specifically watching your thing. There are also things happening in these early videos that have nothing to do with the numbers at all. And they're more, internal. And it's probably more valuable than whatever comes later with success on YouTube, although, that's going to be fun and all. But what I mean is stuff like confidence, right? Every video that I post, no matter how awkward that I sound and awkward I look, or how badly I edited it, it's proof that I can actually do this, that I can sit in front of this camera and have something to say without rambling on. And that courage, that actually compounds, it builds up. Then there's the whole idea of finding your voice, right? You're not going to find that just by thinking about it. You got to start making the videos and publish your way to it. And there are certain things I can talk about naturally. There are certain things I don't, and I'm finding that out by creating these videos. And I know not to talk about certain things now because, it just feels stilted and robotic. Then there's stuff like resilience, creative resilience, like toughness, right? Because learning to create without having people cheer you on, or like somebody going, hey man, great job, that's rare these days. Because most people need constant feedback to keep going. But if you find satisfaction in the work itself, like in the process of actually creating and making something and putting it out there for everybody to see, that's a skill that translates to all kinds of other things outside of YouTube creation. So this is a weird thing. We always talk about, hey, maybe we're too old for YouTube or whatever. But this is something that I don't think gets talked about enough, which is YouTube isn't just for 20-somethings anymore. Actually, I just heard recently on a YouTube video I was watching, and I didn't take a note of it, but they were saying that most successful YouTubers are actually over 40. Go figure, right? And honestly, that means that the platform needs exactly what we're offering, because we're not manufacturing stuff that we're saying, because we've lived it. I've been building businesses for 25 years, late 90s, so 25 plus years. And I've seen trends come and go. I'm sure you have too. And I've made a whole ton of mistakes over those years. And I tried to learn from most of them, or all of them, although I didn't learn some of the lessons very well. That perspective it's not something that you can fake or fast track, because you can read about those failures, but unless you actually do it yourself, they're just words. It's not lived experience. So when I talk about dealing with setbacks, I'm not theorizing or making stuff up. I've actually been there. Creator our age, the over 40 crowd, or in my case, it's over 50, but we bring patience that maybe younger creators might not have. So we kind of understand that things takes time and patience, and sustainable growth isn't like just hitting that one viral moment, on YouTube or Instagram or other social media, right? So, and we know that sustainable growth beats that flash in the pan every single time. And we bring authenticity and we're past that age when we need this constant approval. We're not performing for approval. We know who we are. We're just learning to share it on social media, or in this case, YouTube. So I'm thinking creating this portfolio, not a one-off video. And I think that's where our age really becomes a big advantage. Because when somebody finds you, they're going to see this library of like 5 or 10 or 20 videos, right? If you only had one video that went viral because that's what you're chasing, then there's nowhere for them to go after that, right? But if you have all those other videos that are live, that's a reason for them to subscribe. If they liked one of your videos, they're going to go like, oh, you know what? I really like this video. I wonder what else they have. And they go and look, and there it is, right? And that's what I'm aiming for right now. Get to that 10 videos before I worry about any single one of them performing. Now, if they did perform, amazing, but I'm not going to count on it. And when the algorithm, YouTube, finds me, I want people to have options. And I want them to think like, oh, you know what? This person's serious. I'm not just experimenting and throwing stuff on the wall with all kinds of different videos. I'm doing it kind of very strategically. And that's long-term thinking. And I think that comes just from experience, right? And here's the thing about those fears we talked about a little bit earlier: irrelevance, exposure, judgment, all of that. What if they're not warnings to stop what you're doing, but they're more like signs that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing? I was told one time, like, it's like stretching a rubber band. If you stretch it too fast, it's going to snap, but as you kind of just stretch it slowly, it's going to allow itself to be stretched, right? And that's what these reps are doing. Like, that comfort zone gets bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden it's not such a stretch to create these videos. And then finally, you want to post anyway, not in spite of the fear, but because of it. If posting feels scary right now, that's a sign that you're pushing past your comfort zone. You're really stretching that rubber band. And that fear that you're feeling means you're growing. And the only way to remove fear is to keep posting until that fear becomes fuel. So now, if you have that rubber band and now it's stretched this far, starting from a small rubber band, now you have so much more space to work, and that fear isn't going to, you're not going to be butting heads with that fear all the time. So start noticing this pattern in yourself, right? Fear shows up. You're going to embrace it or acknowledge it anyway. Then you publish the video, and over time, that fear stops being the enemy and starts being the feedback, like this feedback mechanism that you can use. And just remember that the fear shows up because this stuff matters to us, right? Matters to you. Because creating and putting your work out there, that's pretty vulnerable work for each and every one of us. So, just embrace that. And that fear is essentially just a tax you pay to grow. And every time you post anyway, despite the fear, despite the single digit views, even with that voice in your head saying you're too late, or what the heck are you doing, right? You're proving to yourself that you can do all of these hard things, which is to create a YouTube video. It is no easy thing. Well, at least not to me. And that proof, again, compounds video by video. So this is what I want you to remember. So these first videos with these few impressions and even smaller views, none of these are failures. They're the foundation that we're building stuff on. And you want to build a strong foundation, right? You don't want to build something on quicksand. So we're not too late. We're not too old. We're not invisible. We're just beginning of something that's gonna be valuable to us and for someone else that's gonna view the videos. So I'm 6 videos in. This one here is my 7th. Like I said, mostly single digit views. Still figuring this out, but I'm not gonna stop. This is my story, and it's your story when you're creating. So if you're watching this and you've been thinking about starting, this is your sign to post anyway. Not because it's going to be perfect, not because anyone's guaranteed to watch any of these videos, but because the act of creating and sharing, it changes you. And that change, that's worth more than any view count, I think. So just start scared, start small, but just start. And the rest of us are out here trying to figure things out too. And we need your videos and we need your voice in this conversation.